Racist cops shot a black teenager, not knowing he was the son of a judge. In a quiet Chicago suburb, a senseless act of racial injustice shattered a family 18-year-old Jamal Carter. A black teen was gunned down by police after a petty grocery store robbery while his white accomplice Ethan Walsh walked free with a suspended sentence. The police claimed Jamal resisted arrest, but he was only running hands. Empty heart pounding with fear. Ethan caught red-handed. Faced no bullets, only handcuffs. This stark disparity ignited a fire in Jamal's mother, Judge Aisha Carter, a woman of unyielding principle. Her son's death exposed a system that valued one life over another, and she vowed to fight for truth. The tragedy could break her, but Aisha's resolve, honed by years on the bench, promised a battle that could shake the city's foundations. Would her fight for justice expose the rot in the system, or would it cost her everything? The streets buzzed with whispers of protests, and Aisha's gavel was ready to strike. Aisha Carter's mornings began with the soft clink of her coffee mug on the oak kitchen table, the aroma of roasted beans mingling with the crisp Chicago air drifting through the open window. At 45, her chestnut skin glowed under the dawn's light, her braided hair neatly tucked beneath a silk scarf. Her judge's robes hung in the closet, but at home she was just a mother, her hands calloused from years of gripping gavels and wiping Jamal's tears. The small brick house in Englewood hummed with memories, Jamal's laughter, his sneakers squeaking on the hardwood, his dreams of college pinned to the fridge in crayon sketches. Aisha sipped her coffee, her hazel eyes tracing the empty chair where Jamal used to sit, her heart heavy with his absence. She'd raised him alone, a single mother after her husband's death, in a car accident, balancing courtrooms and bedtime stories. Her life was a tightrope walk, between seeking peace and fighting for fairness, a battle etched in the lines on her face. Yesterday's news replayed in her mind: police gunfire, Jamal's body on the pavement, Ethan's lenient sentence. The injustice burned, yet Aisha's calm was a practiced art, honed in court. She set the mug down, her fingers trembling. She wanted quiet to grieve privately, but silence was complicity. Jamal deserved better. Standing, she straightened her scarf, her resolve hardening. She would speak at the community vigil tonight, demanding justice for her son. The corner grocery store on 63rd Street was a fluorescent-lit relic, its shelves stocked with dusty cans and faded cereal boxes. On that humid August evening, the air was thick with the buzz of cicadas and the faint hum of a neon sign flickering above the entrance. Jamal Carter and Ethan Walsh, both 18, slipped inside their sneakers, scuffing the cracked linoleum. It was a foolish plan, grabbing loose change from the register to buy snacks, but their laughter masked their nerves. The clerk, an elderly man with wiry glasses, barely glanced up from his newspaper. The boys won. Black won white moved quickly, Jamal's hands trembling as he scooped coins, Ethan keeping watch. They were out in seconds, the bell above the door, jingling as they bolted into the dusk. Minutes later, sirens wailed, slicing through the neighborhood's quiet. 2 police cruisers screeched to a halt outside the store, their red and blue lights painting the brick walls. A small crowd gathered, kids on bikes, a woman clutching a grocery bag, watching with detached curiosity. The officers' faces, stern under their caps, scanned the street. Jamal and Ethan, caught a block away, froze. "Run!" Ethan hissed, but Jamal was already sprinting, his breath ragged as heart, a drum in his chest. Ethan hesitated, then raised his hands, his pale face calm as an officer approached. Jamal, though, became the target. The officer's shouts, "Stop, hands up," echoed, but Jamal's legs pumped harder, his sneakers slapping the pavement. He wasn't armed, hadn't resisted, just ran, driven by instinct and fear. The first gunshot cracked like thunder, startling the crowd. A child dropped his ice cream, the pink scoop melting on the sidewalk. The second shot followed, then a third. Jamal stumbled, his body crumpling near a chain-link fence, blood pooling beneath him. The officers stood over him, radios crackling, their faces unreadable. He resisted. One muttered, holstering his gun. The crowd murmured, but no one stepped forward. Ethan, now in cuffs, was led to a cruiser, his eyes darting to Jamal's body, his expression blank. The absurdity was suffocating. 2 trees. One crime, but only one lay dead. The officers didn't chase Ethan, didn't draw on him. The crowd's indifference stung worse. The way they averted their eyes, shuffled away as if Jamal's death was just another Tuesday. Aisha Carter heard the news from a neighbor's frantic call. Her phone slipped from her hand, clattering on the kitchen floor. Shock numbed her. Her knees buckled, but she caught herself on the counter. Her son, her only child, gone over pocket change. The police report delivered hours later was a cold lie. Suspect resisted arrest, posed a threat. Aisha's calm forged. In courtrooms held firm, but her eyes burned with unshed tears. She pictured Jamal's smile, his dreams now stolen. The system she served had betrayed her son, and the world had watched in silence. She would not stay quiet. What do you think of this injustice? Like, comment, and subscribe to join the fight for truth. Aisha Carter sat alone in her living room, the silence pressing against her like a weight. The vigil for Jamal was hours away, but her mind was already there, replaying the police report's sterile words. Suspect resisted. Her fingers traced the edge of a framed photo on the coffee table. Jamal at 16, grinning in a graduation cap, his eyes bright with dreams of engineering school. The memory stung sharp as a blade cutting through the calm she wore like armor. She was a judge trained to weigh evidence, to seek truth, but now she was a mother raw and wounded her heart, a bruise that pulsed with every breath. The injustice of Jamal's death wasn't just a case, it was personal, a betrayal by the system she'd sworn to uphold. She stood her bare feet cold on the hardwood and crossed to the window. Outside, Inglewood moved on. Kids, road bikes, a delivery truck rumbled by, the world indifferent to her loss. Aisha felt like a ghost, unseen, her grief isolating her from the neighborhood she'd called home for decades. She'd always been the strong one, the widow who raised Jamal alone, the judge who faced down corruption in court. But now doubt gnawed at her. Could she fight this? The police, the city, the silent crowd at the scene, they all seemed complicit, a wall of apathy she couldn't breach. Her chest tightened, her breath shallow. She wanted to scream, to shatter the silence, but her lips stayed pressed, her judge's restraint holding her together. Aisha's eyes caught a flicker of movement, a neighbor across the street, Mrs. Thompson, watering her roses. Their gazes met briefly, but Mrs. Thompson looked away, her shoulders hunching as if Aisha's pain was contagious. That small gesture, that avoidance cut deeper than words. No one had come to her door since the news broke. No casseroles, no condolences, just whispers behind curtains. The community she'd served as a judge now shunned her, as if Jamal's death tainted her too. She remembered the crowd at the scene, their averted eyes, the way they'd let the police's lie stand unchallenged. Isolation wrapped around her like a fog, cold and suffocating. She sank onto the couch, her hands clenching the photo frame. Jamal's smile seemed to accuse her. Why didn't you protect me? Guilt mingled with her anger, a toxic brew that made her temples throb. She taught Jamal to respect the law, to trust the system she served. Had she failed him? The thought was a splinter in her mind impossible to dislodge. Yet beneath the hurt, a spark of resilience flickered. Aisha had faced loss before her husband's death, the struggle to raise Jamal on a judge's salary. She'd survived by fighting, by refusing to bow. This time the stakes were higher, but the fire in her was the same. The doorbell rang sharp and jarring. Aisha flinched, her pulse spiking. She set the photo down and approached the door, her movement slow, deliberate. Through the peephole, she saw a young woman, maybe 25, with a notepad and a nervous smile, a reporter likely. Aisha's first instinct was to turn away, to shield her grief from the world, but something stopped her. The vigil tonight wasn't just for Jamal, it was for every mother who'd lost a child to a system that didn't care. If she stayed silent, she'd be no better than the crowd that watched Jamal die. Her hand hovered over the doorknob, trembling. She was alone. Yes, but she wasn't powerless. Her position, her voice could pierce the fog of indifference. Aisha opened the door, her face composed, but her eyes fierce. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice low, steady. The reporter stammered, asking for a statement. Aisha's gaze drifted past her to the street where Jamal used to play. The tension in her chest coiled tighter, but she straightened, her resolve hardening. She would speak not just to the reporter, but to the city, to the world. The isolation, the pain, they wouldn't silence her. Jamal's death demanded a reckoning, and she would deliver it one word at a time. The community center was packed for Jamal's vigil, the air heavy with the scent of candle wax and murmured prayers. Aisha Carter stood at the podium, her black dress stark against the flickering glow of candles held by mourners. Her hands gripped the wooden edge, steadying her as she faced the crowd neighbors. Activist strangers drawn by the news. Their faces blurred into a sea of expectation, but Aisha felt the weight of their eyes. Some sympathetic, others skeptical. Her throat tightened, the words she'd rehearsed, threatening to dissolve into grief. But she thought of Jamal, his laugh, his dreams, his body on the pavement, and her resolve sharpened like a blade. "Ladies and gentlemen," Aisha began, her voice low but clear, cutting through the room's hum. "My son, Jamal Carter, was 18. He made a mistake, but he didn't deserve to die." The crowd stilled, her words landing like stones. She described the robbery the police chased, the gunfire that took her son, while Ethan Walsh, his white accomplice, faced only a slap on the wrist. Gasps rippled through the room, and Aisha's eyes caught a young man in the back, his phone raised, live streaming her speech. Good, she thought. Let the world hear. Aisha's position as a judge gave her words weight, but it was her raw honesty that held the crowd. I've spent my life upholding justice, she said, her voice rising, but the system I serve failed my son. It fails too many of our children. She paused, her gaze sweeping the room, locking eyes with a city council member in the front row. I'm not just a grieving mother. I'm a judge, and I know the law. I will use every tool I have to hold those officers accountable. The crowd erupted in applause, but Aisha raised a hand, silencing them. This isn't just my fight, it's ours. Her decisive action came not in a shout, but in a calculated move. She announced a formal complaint against the officers filed through her judicial network, demanding an independent investigation. She'd already contacted a civil rights attorney, Lena Harris, who stood beside her, now nodding in solidarity. Aisha's influence reached beyond the bench she'd mentored. Young lawyers sat on legal boards and knew the city's power brokers. Her complaint wasn't a plea. It was a legal grenade, lobbed with precision to shake the police department's foundation. The crowd murmured, sensing the shift. Aisha's pain had become power, her isolation a rallying cry. A young ally emerged from the crowd, Malik, a 20-year-old activist who'd grown up with Jamal. He approached the podium, his dreadlocks swaying, his eyes fierce. Judge Carter's right, he said, his voice booming. We can't let this slide. Malik revealed he'd organized a petition already with 5,000 signatures demanding the officers' badges. He'd also uploaded a video of Aisha's speech to social media, tagging local news outlets. The post was gaining traction, retweets spreading like wildfire. Aisha met Malik's gaze, a silent pact forming. Her legal clout and his grassroots energy were a potent combination, a spark that could ignite change. The room buzzed with tension, the air electric with possibility. Aisha felt the shift her words. Malik's actions, the crowd's growing resolve, but the path ahead was uncertain. The police union was powerful, the city's politics murky. Aisha's complaint could force an investigation, but would it bring justice? Malik's petition could amplify the pressure, but would it sway the system? She stepped back from the podium, her heart pounding, her hands steady. She'd taken the first step, but the fight was just beginning. How will Aisha and her allies turn this moment into lasting justice for Jamal? The weeks following the vigil were a storm of momentum. Aisha Carter's speech, amplified by Malik's viral video, had lit a fuse across Chicago. The grainy footage of her standing tall, her voice steady yet laced with pain, spread beyond Inglewood, racking up millions of views on social media. Hashtags like Justice for Jamal trended, and news outlets from local stations to national networks picked up the story. The pressure was undeniable, a tidal wave crashing against the city's power structures. Aisha's formal complaint, backed by her judicial credentials, and Lena Harris's legal expertise, forced the mayor's office to act. An independent investigation was launched, led by a state prosecutor known for her impartiality. The investigation peeled back layers of misconduct. Body camera footage, initially withheld, surfaced under public outcries showing Jamal running hands empty, no threat in his posture. The officers' claim of resistance unraveled their reports riddled with inconsistencies. The lead officer, a veteran with a history of complaints, was suspended without pay, his badge stripped pending trial. His partner faced similar charges, excessive force, falsifying reports. The police union grumbled, but public opinion fueled by protests outside City Hall drowned out their defenses. Ethan Walsh's suspended sentence came under scrutiny too. A judge reopened his case, citing racial disparity. Ethan was ordered to serve community service and probation, his leniency no longer a quiet footnote. Aisha felt the shift in her bones. She walked into the courtroom for the officer's arraignment, her head high, her black suit crisp against her skin. The gallery was packed. Activists, reporters, neighbors who'd once avoided her gaze now nodding in respect. Malik sat in the front row, his petition now boasting 50,000 signatures, a testament to the community's awakening. The officers stood before the judge, their faces pale, eyes darting. Aisha's testimony, delivered with the precision of a seasoned jurist, was damning. She recounted Jamal's life, his dreams, the senselessness of his death. Her voice never wavered, but her hands, hidden behind the witness stand, clenched until her nails bit into her palms. The judge's gavel fell, setting a trial date, and the crowd exhaled a collective release of tension. Outside, the courthouse cameras flashed microphones thrust toward Aisha. She spoke briefly, her words measured. "This is a step toward justice, but it's not the end." Jamal's life mattered. The crowd chanted his name, a rhythm that echoed down the street. For the first time since his death, Aisha felt a flicker of dignity restored not just for herself but for her son. The system hadn't erased her pain, but it was bending, forced to reckon with its flaws. She caught Malik's eye. His nod, a silent vow to keep pushing. Lena Harris at her side whispered, "We're just getting started." The officer's trial months later was a spectacle. Evidence piled up, witness testimonies, forensic reports, the damning body cam footage. The lead officer was convicted of manslaughter and perjury, sentenced to 15 years. His partner received 7 years for accessory charges. The verdicts sent ripples through the city, a rare accountability that sparked debates on police reform. The department issued a public apology, a hollow gesture to some, but a crack in the wall of institutional silence. Aisha sat in the courtroom, her face composed, but her heart raced. She'd won a battle, not the war, but the victory was hers and Jamal's. Back home, Aisha stood in her kitchen, the same oak table where she'd grieved now, holding a stack of letters from supporters nationwide. She sipped her coffee, the familiar clink of the mug grounding her. The fight had changed her. Her eyes carried new lines, but they burned with purpose. She was no longer just a judge or a mother. She was a voice of force. The community, once distant, now rallied around her, their silence replaced by solidarity. Jamal's memory was alive, not in tragedy, but in the fight for justice. What will you do to keep Jamal's legacy alive? Share your thoughts below. Aisha Carter stood in her backyard, the late autumn sun casting long shadows across the brittle grass. The officer's convictions were a triumph, a rare moment when the system bent under the weight of truth. Yet as she clutched a faded photo of Jamal, her victory felt hollow, like a half-finished song. The courtroom cheers couldn't fill the silence in her home, where Jamal's sneakers still sat by the door gathering dust. Her fight had restored her dignity, but at a cost that gnawed at her soul. Her health had frayed, sleepless nights left dark circles under her eyes, and stress tightened her chest, a warning from her doctor to slow down. Her reputation, once unassailable, now carried whispers. Some colleagues called her biased, a judge too personal in her crusade. The community's support was a lifeline, but it couldn't replace the loved ones lost to her cause. Old friends wary of her newfound activism drifted away, their calls unanswered, their visits rare. Aisha had gained allies, Malik, Lena, the thousands who signed petitions, but the intimacy of her old life was a casualty of her fight. She'd traded peace for justice, a choice that left her both proud and achingly alone. The media hailed her as a hero, but at night she was just a mother, haunted by Jamal's absence, wondering if she could have saved him. Justice, she realized, was a jagged edge, never smooth, never complete. The officers were behind bars, but the system that enabled them still stood its roots deep and tangled. Aisha's complaint had sparked an investigation, but policy changes were slow-mired in bureaucracy. She'd won a battle, but the war for equality was endless. Her heart carried both the weight of loss and the spark of defiance. She'd fought for Jamal, and that was enough to keep her standing, even if her knees trembled. Aisha knelt, placing the photo against a small rosebush she'd planted for Jamal. The petals, touched by frost, mirrored her fragile hope. She whispered his name, a promise to keep going, not for glory, but for him. Justice wasn't perfect, but it was worth the scars. The ripples of Aisha Carter's fight spread beyond the courtroom. The officer's convictions spurred Chicago to act. The city council passed a police reform bill mandating body camera transparency and de-escalation training. A state task force launched investigations into past misconduct cases, unearthing patterns of racial bias. Malik's petition evolved into a grassroots movement, with community forums demanding accountability. National media amplified the story, prompting signature campaigns for federal oversight of police practices. Aisha's name became a beacon, her courage inspiring protests and policy debates across the country. She was honored at a city gala, a plaque in her hand gleaming under chandeliers, but Aisha chose a quieter path. She returned to her bench, ruling with renewed purpose, mentoring young lawyers to challenge injustice. Her home, once a shrine of grief, now hosted community meetings, voices rising over coffee and hope. She didn't seek the spotlight. Peace was in the work and keeping Jamal's memory alive through change. On a crisp morning, Aisha swept her backyard, the broom's bristles whispering against the stone path. She paused by the rose bush dedicated to Jamal, its blooms defiant against the chill. Placing a single white flower at its base, she smiled softly, feeling the community's strength behind her. She walked to a nearby park, joining neighbors, planting trees in Jamal's name, their laughter mingling with the rustle of leaves, a symbol of roots growing stronger together. Aisha Carter's fight for Jamal was more than a mother's cry. It was a torch passed to the next generation. Her courage turned grief into a movement, her integrity a blueprint for standing tall against injustice. She showed that one voice rooted in truth could shake a city's foundations. Now the question echoes. What will you do after learning this story? Will you speak up when silence is easier, challenge systems that fail the vulnerable, or carry Jamal's name forward in your own fight for what's right? Every step counts, whether it's a petition, a conversation, or a vote. Courage isn't loud. It's the quiet resolve to act even when the odds loom large. Aisha's legacy lives in the rose bush blooming in her yard, in the trees planted in Jamal's name, and the laws reshaped by her defiance. She taught us that justice is a relay, each runner passing the baton to the next. Young activists like Malik, inspired by her, are already running, their voices rising. You too can join them, ensuring Jamal's death wasn't in vain. As Aisha once said, justice isn't a destination, it's a journey we walk together, step by painful step. Let her words guide you. Fight for what's right, not for applause, but for those who can't. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to keep this story alive and inspire change. Racist cops shot a black teenager, not knowing he was the son of a judge.